Good morning, everyone. So this is Patricia Williams with Audit and Advisory Services, and I'm here with Nikki Tox, who's also a team member. So we're going to get started. If you can't hear or you're having issues, let me know. If you could send us a through the chat message or shoot an email if there's any issues, but it should be fine. We actually muted everyone upon entry, so we shouldn't be able to hear anything from you guys. I don't think there should be any feedback or anything. Presenting, Nikki's going to be doing, kind of handling the slide deck as well as responding to anything that comes through the chat. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. We're going to do a question and answer at the end of the presentation. You can submit any questions that you have through the chat feature, and we'll accumulate them as we go. And once we get to the Q&A part, we'll just go ahead and start with the first question that we get. And if I'm out of time, what we're going to do is take the questions and write up the answers and post them onto the audit website. A recording of the webinar will be posted on our website as well with the deck. So you'll be able to go back to the actual presentation and look at the slide deck as well. So get started. We're about this is a fraud awareness presentation. So we're going to cover how to increase fraud awareness and looking at your current fraud environment, what the fraud risk factors are, and the key categories of fraud. And then we're also going to follow up with going through a few different case studies that relate to phishing fraud, ransomware fraud, supplier payment, and misappropriations internally by employees. So what is fraud? According to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, it's the intentional or deliberate act to deprive another of property or money by guile, deception, or other unfair means. So, basically, that could, for our purposes, that could include assets like money, inventory, and as well as information, so customer or patient information or employee information. Principal types of fraud include fraudulent or negligent misrepresentation of material facts, so lying to cover your tracks or lying to gain something from, usually some type of like collar type fraud, bribery, conflicts of interest, which is also a big one for us on the university and hospital side, and theft of money or property that belongs to the university, and those types of things. So that's listed there for you. The next slide, we go through the fraud triangle, which the fraud triangle is kind of showing what factors play to making an environment kind of right for fraud to occur. And then pressure from if management has quotas or downward pressure on employees to perform a certain way from a financial standpoint, and it can be internal or external to the organization. There can be pressure due to the competitive environment of the actual organization. Opportunity, it's circumstances that exist that make appealing for someone to commit fraud if there's not good internal controls, or if they have internal controls but they know that people aren't doing them consistently, and it provides an opportunity for someone to do something that is fraudulent against the organization. Penalization is where the person who's committing fraud, the reasons that they're giving themselves to, think that it's okay to go ahead and commit the fraud. So feel like, I'm not making enough money here, or, I'm being underpaid, I didn't get a raise, so it's okay for me to take these things and make some extra money on the side. So who's responsible for identifying fraud? Everybody. So management is always obviously has the primary ownership of internal controls and, is responsible for making sure that they are in place and operating effectively, and the staff are responsible for being aware of what, policies and procedures we have in place and things that should be, doing or looking out for within their procedures to maybe notify management and say, hey, this looks like something is suspicious is happening, and for management to kind of take the ball and, do investigation and that type of thing. So it's a end-to-end process, and everybody has some responsibility within the organization to be on the lookout for fraud and, raise the whistle if something looks suspicious. So the first category that we're going to start off with looking at is phishing. This is, cybersecurity fraud. I think we're all pretty familiar. At UC, for sure, we receive a lot of different types of phishing emails, where someone is reaching out to you and trying to get you to provide some information, either through email or also through phone. Someone could, find our information, our contact information on the UCSF website in the directory and call to request, please someone else and request these information from us. They are pretending to be someone that would be, known to you, so maybe a bank, Wells Fargo, or maybe it's a supply of something that UCSF deals with, and, they're operating to be that entity, and so, to make you comfortable enough to give out information to them. More sophisticated ways that the frauds are using now is called spear phishing, and this is where they can collect, information about you and about the organization online and through social media, and kind of more so personalize these emails or calls so that it seems more legitimate. Because it's getting more sophisticated to where it's not always going to look very obvious. All these grammar mistakes and different things that you would normally see in phishing emails. It's starting to look really like something that would be generated by a legitimate source that you know. So it's important to pay attention for those things. Some of this that come with phishing are identity theft and virus infections, and compromising the institutional information. Some of the emerging trends, this slide is just really something that we found from an interesting data perspective. Is these are the top subject lines that people are clicking on when they get phishing emails. So, and some of these that really stood out, I know that like the revised vacation and sick time policy, we would, that's something that we would see coming through from an HR or something like that. So you wouldn't necessarily be suspicious if you saw something, or unusual sign-in activity. It may kind of alarm you, and maybe you click in thinking, oh, somebody's trying to compromise one of my accounts, and things like that are things that you would receive that are valid. The fraudsters are kind of taking advantage of that, and they're being successful with sending these type of emails. So the first case study here, so Andy accountant received the following email that appears to be from his organization's IT department regarding a network outage. So this is something I thought was a good idea to look at, because we do get a lot of emails from our IT department for any type of scheduled network maintenance. And if you take a closer look at the email, I mean, it's written pretty well. There's some, if you look really closely, there's a couple of grammar mistakes, but it may not be something that jumps at you, and there's like links at the bottom that they're asking you to click. So to access the local area network, on how to use and to contact them. So this is one that I thought was this is actually a real phishing email, and I thought it was a really good example because, it does look like something that you get all the time, and it wouldn't necessarily raise a red flag. And, if you were to click to even just to contact the help desk, you could be clicking something that may unleash a virus or something else along those lines. So here we talk about kind of what to look for when you get an email or a phone call or something that you suspect is a phishing email or contact. So somebody requesting your username and password is, 100% of the time going to be a phishing email, because generally no one's going to request that you send that information to them through an email channel or over the phone. That's the whole point of securing a password. So that is really a big red flag. Time-sensitive threats, so saying, okay, your account's going to be shut down within the next, 24 hours if you don't respond or click on this link. That's something that, especially, if it's your financial information or something like that, it could alarm someone enough that they aren't thinking and click on it. Spelling and grammar mistakes, like we kind of talked about a little earlier, I think that is getting a little better, especially as they get more sophisticated, but it's still something that if you pay attention, you can tell. Vague or missing information in the from field or email signature. A lot of times, what we can do is hover over that from field and see, hey, this says from Wells Fargo, but this is a email address, or it's something that looks weird. It doesn't look like it's something general, administrator at Wells Fargo or something like that, that isn't necessarily reflecting what the content of the email says. The to field containing multiple random email addresses or is alphabetized, that's something that, they're spamming these messages to a lot of different people, and they, usually buy these lists of emails to target different people or different organizations, and so that's something that could be a red flag if you're seeing, just a bunch of random ones from different, different, not necessarily within your organization or things like that. Impersonal or awkward greetings, that kind of goes back to the spelling and grammar mistakes. Reading it just sounds off to you. Affected files or downloads. This one is a big one. I know that a lot of times we will get, legitimate links for someone who maybe, for our UCSF box account, when someone adds you to a file, we could legitimately be getting something that has that, and it tells you to click a link within the email. So, but if it's something that you're thinking, why would I need to click a link or download, a statement from this email or things like that? But I think it's kind of things to look out for, and, maybe you don't want to click that link if you're not 100% sure. Links that don't refer to the sender or sender's organization. So if it's a link saying, this is from PayPal or something, or it's from eBay, but the link is taking you to something that doesn't say at ebay.com, that's a red flag. Emails about accounts that you don't have, such as eBay or PayPal, or banks that you don't have accounts with. So this is kind of where they're just throwing something at the wall, hoping that someone will, click on a link that they're sending. So what steps you should take? Ideally, if you don't, if it looks suspicious to you, you really just should delete the email. Just avoid, clicking on something by mistake or, just responding. You don't want to do anything that could possibly activate any type of malicious ware or things like that. Don't reply or click on any links in the messages. One thing I know that if something comes from an internal UCSF user, it's a good idea, like I was mentioning about the box situation. If someone adds me to a box file and it's something I didn't expect, I'll go and I'll create a new message in Outlook, and I will look those people up, whoever it's coming from, in the directory, which that could catch you right there if the person isn't listed in the directory. But if they are, you send them a quick email and say, hey, did you send me a link to Box, or did you send me a link to this? Just validate with them that, hey, I got something and I don't want to click on it before I'm comfortable with knowing what it is. If you do receive a phishing email and you click on a link by mistake, you need to contact the IT service desk immediately, so you can report that your account's been compromised and that you can change all your passwords. And this is the contact information for them. But, definitely, if it happens, sometimes people do click on things, but you want to communicate that to them so that they know there's a threat out there and there's a possible compromise to not only your PC, but also possibly to the network. The next area we're going to talk about is ransomware. Ransomware basically kind of works hand in hand with the phishing, either phishing emails usually. Someone sends a phishing email and there's a link there that if you click it by mistake, it unleashes some a ransomware or software that will encrypt critical files on your PC and sometimes the network, depending on how sophisticated it is. And you'll be able to access your files. And usually, why it's called ransomware, whoever the perpetrator is will demand ransom in order to unencrypt the files or provide the key to open them up. Usually, Bitcoin is a really popular way for them to request ransom because it's anonymous and, it's very anonymous. So you basically can't trace who it's going to, or, there's no way really, it's not easy to really find out, get the authorities involved. Risk there, similar to phishing, organizations can lose access to critical data, and it could, cripple your operations for, you really don't know how long, because you don't know how long it would take to, if he is able to address it, or if it's something that you won't be able to fix. So it could be a public relations and reputational nightmare for organization. Obviously, for a hospital, if our systems were to get attacked and this critical system, something impacts or something like that, we would have an issue with treating patients. So I hope that's the sensitive data, because obviously if they're able to attack it, encrypt it, they have access to that data at this point. Here we talk about emerging trends in ransomware. We've seen a surge of activity over the past year in the ransomware fraud category because the criminals are able to have easy access to perpetrate this kind of fraud, because you can go and buy a kit online, obviously on the black market, that will give you everything you need to attack an organization. There are new kits that have been available since January of this year, which package really highly effective attacks. As I mentioned, hospitals do good targets because of the type of data we have, and because of, the ability to treat patients is such a critical thing that you get that going as soon as possible if there's an issue. And you may have heard of the publicity around the Hollywood Presbyterian attack, where, and I included the link here, but there was some hackers who someone put the link in an email, and it ended up freezing some data, encrypting some data that related to patient care. And they did end up paying a $17,000 ransom to the hackers. And financial opportunity is fairly simple, because you can purchase kits online. There's a good chance of being paid, because organizations cannot take an incident that would basically cripple your operation. That puts you out of business. So people don't want to take that chance. And there's risk of being caught. It's done anonymously. It's on the internet. It's, the pin is through Bitcoin. So it's a hard, to pin down the people who are doing these kind of things. They could really be anywhere. Here, this is a case study we have around the ransomware. So Dr. Doolittle received the following email that appears to be from his organization's Ethics and Compliance Department. This is also a real ransomware email example, and I think this is something that, we get things like this all the time. Our ethics and compliance, any type of annual training that is, the university monitors, we would get an email like this, and it would live link, that we click on. So you're taking a look through this, some of the things that may jump out, grammar's a little bit off, and, but it really looks pretty real. It looked really real to me. So I thought that this was a good example of that, you have to really kind of look really deeply into. And for ransomware emails, you would use the same approach that you're using for the phishing emails, which is, verify, looking at the content, seeing, what the links are, kind of hovering over the links to see where they take you. Is it actually taking you to a UCSF site? Or is it taking you somewhere else? For internal email, as I mentioned before, it's good to always, you can, if it's come from an individual, go and send them a direct email, not replying to the one that came to you. Or, for something like this, it's like, okay, go check out the Ethics and Compliance site and see, hey, they usually have these things posted on their site. So you could click them there and do what you need to do, but usually that's something that's going to be under their current announcements or something like that. And same thing for external emails, UCSF thing, if it's a different company, you can go to their website that is their accurate website and actually check and see, if what you received is something that you see reflected on their website. Or they may have an alert that says, hey, there's a phishing scam going on and this is what it looks like. So those are ways to kind of confirm before you click on anything or reply, to verify that it's actually a valid email. So same thing, delete the email as far as your response and actions you should take. Delete the email, don't click any links, don't reply. And also the thing is, if you do mistakenly click on something, with ransomware, it's also really, pertinent that you make sure that you're contacting the IT Service Help Desk as soon as possible, so that they can start working on it, because you don't know how long it will take them to have to figure out, what happened, isolate the issue, and you respond to the incident. And you could possibly be locked out of files, your department, the entire university, depending on what they target. So, this is where procedures and manual workarounds would come into play for you to be able to complete critical functions. And this is having a business continuity plan and being able to work off of that while any systems are not accessible. The next category we're looking at is supplier payment fraud, and here suppliers being our vendors, third-party vendors that we work with externally. This is when someone convinces you to change any payment details by pretending to be a supplier or a known vendor that we work with, and then either request a payment or wait for a payment to come through with the new banking details. And here we talk about construction companies. When we're doing something, the construction company, usually has a banner or a billboard or something advertising that they're working on that project. And so due to that visibility, a lot of times they will be targeted for these types of fraud schemes. And the being, misappropriated funds, so the theft of the actual cash, and damaging the relationship with the supplier depending on, if it delays payment to them, which it could do. Talk about the fraud scheme that is executed by the fraudster in this type of fraud. So usually what they'll do is, research that particular supplier's website to get an understanding of what they do and any key staff, because those are things or details that they may use when they are trying to, make the changes that they want to make. Looking at press releases that show, any contracts that they've won, so they know which clients of that particular supplier to target. Online transparency of tenders and the award of contracts, and being in a governmental environment that is transparent, and they can know which vendors we're using for these large projects due to the bidding requirements. Unsuspecting employees tricked into providing details. This is kind of similar, going back to, and a lot of this is very interlinked, but going back to the phishing. If somebody calls you or emails you requesting information, and if they've done their research, they may be able to pretend to be someone who, we know to be a known associate of the business. They may be able to really convince someone, especially someone who may be a more, newer employee, or, someone who's not used to dealing with that kind of thing. And their approach, usually they call in or send in, go through whatever the process is for the business, you sending in an email of some sort to say, hey, I'll make changes to this banking information, or send something on a forged letterhead document, which, a lot of times, people will, if you're paying attention and they can do a good job, you may not recognize that it's fake. And this is one thing that in our research we were finding, is that the hovering over the email address and, saying, oh, is this really from, AT&T or whomever the vendor is? Well, they have the ability to spoof or clone domain names. So they could very well be using whatever the domain name is, UCSF.edu, and it still be fake. So that's something that we have to be vigilant about as well. So here's the case study for this one. In this scenario, Patty in procurement is responsible for updating bank details for university suppliers. She received an email request from a known supplier to change their banking information to a different routing number and bank account. The domain name on the requester's email matched the supplier's known domain. Patty updated the banking details in the vendor master file. It was later discovered that the change in banking information was requested by a fraudster and a payment was made to a fraudulent account. So here, what went wrong here? There wasn't really a rigorous process in place within Patty's department in order to manage these changes to the supplier details. And it wasn't any type of external verification performed with the known supplier to ensure that the request was valid. what can to prevent or detect this fraud. Train and educate your staff to ensure that they know that these types of frauds are happening. You know, the FBI website is a really good place to start as far as, you know, they send out a lot of alerts about different things that are happening and trends that they see, so that you can keep, you know, make sure that your staff are being vigilant and they're paying attention when they have to process these kind of transactions. Ensure that, you know, when we're doing these type of things, we are including it's very sensitive information dealing with accounts and things like that. So, you know, you want to make it as secure as possible. So maybe the phone isn't the best way to take those kind of transactions. And also departments, you know, outside of procurement, some places departments are managing those changes. You know, they're the first point for those changes. So making sure that we are comfortable with knowing who we're dealing with, you know, if it's not someone we know from the supplier side. Introducing a rigorous change of supplier details procedure. This here, you want to establish procedures internally and externally so that, you know, your suppliers know what the process is when they are submitting changes, and they, you know, your staff knows what to look for, who the points of contact are for those changes. It's really one of the stronger controls that you can have is kind of the relationship there. So if the department is used to dealing with somebody specific, that person should be listed as the point of contact for any changes in bank details. Or if you want, you know, we already have that information, and then we receive something and it's coming from someone totally different, then, you know, that kind of raises a red flag already. When calling a supplier back to check the veracity of the request, always use details in your system. Or, you know, ideally you want something that's a third party or external verification. So going to Google and going to Dun & Bradstreet or whatever you have access to that is not using the contact information that the person who sent the request is giving you, because, you know, you can create you call the person who sent the request and they're circling you back to them. So a fraudster can easily do that, and, you know, so it's ideal that we are getting our information from a different source that's not the person submitting the request. Concerned about the source of a call, ask the caller to provide you with a main switchboard number. And honestly, I think even here, I would still prefer to go to a Google or, you know, the company's website and try to get a number there, because, you know, you would feel more comfortable then, because they can obviously send you a switchboard as well if it's, you know, if they're sophisticated enough. So, you know, you get third-party verification, and getting contact details that aren't coming from them is usually the best route for something like this, to verify that you're getting a bank change from the actual supplier. Section is misappropriation, and this is kind of broad, and it's mainly focused on the internal employee misappropriation. Misappropriation being defined as unauthorized use of taking of university assets. It can, you know, be theft, embezzlement, fraud, making decisions that pose a conflict between the employee's interest and the university's interest. And, you know, that misappropriation is probably one of the biggest categories of fraud. 90% of all fraud involves asset misappropriation, according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and a lot of that being cash, you know. So, you know, you have somebody who's handling petty cash in the department, or cash handlers as far as, you know, the cash businesses, as well as electronic forms, so checks, misdirecting of ACH payments and things like that. The risk being that loss of cash and, you know, theft of inventory or misuse of information, and, you know, to a certain extent, misappropriation of data is something that's also a big issue as we, you know, move into, you know, we're in the 21st century, and people can, you know, they can be more valuable sometimes than inventory or whole physical assets, you know, being able to sell those things on the market. So our first study is Timmy Thief was purchasing printer toner cartridges from the university supplier and reselling those cartridges on eBay. To cover his tracks, Timmy was posting the expenses for these cartridges over several different department accounts. So what went wrong? One of the big things is that the employee had access to not only make purchases but post those transactions to the ledger. Any controls in place to identify whether when we receive purchase inventory and, when we receive logging it and, maintaining it in a controlled manner, especially for things that may be kind of higher dollar value. What could prevent or detect fraud? This is where something like this, obviously putting in segregation of duties and not having the same person making the purchase actually posting it to the GL, but also having a third person do the reconciliation verification to the GL on a regular basis so that you have a set of eyes. If sometimes you don't have enough people to maybe, segregate as much as you would like, but having control around the GL verification, another set of eyes look at the transactions and say, hey, this is something I haven't seen any cartridges actually be received into the department, or, looking at the amount of purchases I'm seeing, this doesn't line up to, inventory and things like that. So that kind of it's a detective control on the back end, but it's one of the stronger ones that we'll have when it comes to people making making purchases and the expenses hitting the GL. And usually, within your GL verification, your process should include the validation of expenses charged to the cost center and reviewing the approved invoices. So there should be support for all expenses that hit. If you can validate them, then that's when kind of, your spider senses go off to say, let me go, do some investigation to figure out, why do we have support for this, or, if we don't have support, kind of what happened. And that, then itself can deter people from doing things like this because they know that somebody else is watching and looking and going through the process of validating. Inventory should be regularly reviewed and counted. So here, if this employee was making, multiple purchases of these printer toner inks, and, if it, from a trend analysis standpoint, somebody is looking at the GL and the inventory saying, hey, this doesn't line up, and you should be, validating that you're receiving things that, you're seeing your expense ledger. So, if I'm seeing that on the expense side, I know that I should be seeing that hitting my inventory count. And ideally, with inventory, like I said, anything that, of higher value, you want to have it maintained by a certain person, so that that person can keep an eye on those kind of any trends that look kind of suspicious. Budget to actual expense review should be performed on a regular basis. And this is, if he was doing this on an ongoing basis, should pop out. I mean, because kind of those type of things tend to be on a certain cadence that's in a regular interval that there would be some outliers if he's just kind of ordering based on what he's doing, the size selling business. So someone keeping an eye on that, ideally the same person who, looking at the expenses as well, but isn't actually doing the posting. So the next one is a case study around medical identity theft. In this scenario, Anthony Red Flag works for the university's hospital and has legitimate access to patients' medical records to perform his job. However, he uses his access to randomly access patient records and print out scanned images of their insurance cards, which he gives or sells to his friends. Some of his friends are seen by the university's doctors while using other patients' insurance information, and as a result, their treatment records are mixed with actual patient records, impacting patient safety and creating fraudulent charges. So they kind of have a couple of things going on here in this scenario. So what went wrong? So unauthorized access and activities were not detected because even though he had access, he does access records as a part of his job, he was accessing ones that didn't in his job duty. So outside of his line of duty, he's going and doing, checking other people's records. Medical identity theft was not detected at the time of admission, as OID was not used for verifying patient identification. So that's where this employee, when he is sent off the patient's insurance information, when his friend, whomever they sell it to, are coming in, nobody's checking that, hey, this patient's information matches to an ID. So that's kind of, there's two parts there as a part of this scenario. What could be done to prevent or detect the fraud? Train staff to recognize and mitigate medical identity theft. We have some references here that you guys can check out, but basically talking through red flags that should pop up. So if you are getting someone who, you know, when they don't have ID, or they have, when looking at the history on their record, it doesn't match up to what they're coming in for, and things like that, that kind of give whoever's treating them, whoever's admitting them, kind of red flags. Patient identification policy, that's all, you know, what are we using to identify if they don't have a ID, which could be valid, but, you know, there needs to be other steps in place to make sure that we don't have situations like this where this is somebody just using someone else's insurance information. I'm in a process to identify and report actual or suspected fraud, where, you know, if there's suspicious documents, someone else had, you know, seen this employee maybe accessing things outside of his normal job duties, they should have a channel to report those things. Changes in blood type, this is people coming in using someone else's information, and, you know, their records aren't matching up to the person who's standing in front of you, or, you know, the records, if you're doing procedures and it doesn't jive. Just significant changes in the patient records would kind of flag to whoever's treating them, hey, this doesn't make sense. And there'd be a policy and a process in place to report those kinds of things so that they can be investigated. And determine and promote each department's role in preventing medical identity theft. This is where, you know, going back to earlier in the presentation when we talk about the staff and management are both responsible. You know, we all have our little parts in when through the process, especially on the health side, if we're interacting with patients and we're going through, you know, from registration on to, you know, the nurse on to the doctor, et cetera. We all have our parts and, you know, things that we should be paying attention to, and making sure that as a department we are, you know, letting people know, here are the red flags, this is what you should look for, and this is, you know, here is how you need to be reporting these things, or here's a way to talk about things that you think be suspicious and you have some questions about. So next, this slide is just more the takeaways from this presentation. You know, one is to just be vigilant. They're, you know, in a very fast-paced, and we work in a very fast-paced environment, and things are constantly changing with our processes and also with the environment that we're working with and with patients and, you know, staff, et cetera. So be vigilant, you know and understand the policies and procedures that govern the different processes that you work within, and, you know, you don't know the answer, you know, find someone to ask, whether it's your manager. And as Audit, we are also happy. We field a lot of questions from people about different types of processes and things, and we work with a lot of different people across the board. So we have our Audit Advisor mailbox that people send us all different kinds of questions. So if there's something from an internal controls perspective or a compliance perspective that you have questions about, you know, we're happy to answer, and if we don't know, we'll get the right people involved. But, you know, being on these kind of things is probably the best way to prevent fraud from happening. Awareness, you know, trainings like this, there's other trainings, and, you know, one that we may be facilitating in the future, I think with the FBI, and their key things that they're seeing at higher education institutions or in healthcare, you know, but, you know, being proactive about seeking out the information and, you know, disseminating it to either, you know, if you're a manager, disseminating it to staff, if you're staff, disseminating it to peers, to your manager, because we all, you know, have to, you know, we have to do our job, so we also have to pay attention and be aware of what's happening and, you know, what things to look out for. And things trainings like this, and like I said, we will facilitate some more in the future, but there's different ones also on the Learning Center that we can use as well from a fraud perspective and from a process perspective if there's things like that. Reporting fraud. So, your first step is going to be to report any suspected fraud to your manager. If you're not comfortable doing that, or if it's the manager doing the fraud, report something anonymously to the whistleblower hotline, which we have a number listed here, and also there's confidential web reporting on the Ethics Point site, which you can go and submit any suspected fraud there. And, someone's going to investigate every submission, so that at that point, it can kind of come down to whether it is fraud or not fraud, but it's, it's a way for you to submit something that you're not comfortable maybe going directly to your manager or someone in your department with. So we'll stop here and figure out if anyone has any questions or about any case studies that we've gone through, or about something that's happening on your end of things. You can kind of feel those now. Let's see, go back to, is this it? Did you close it? There you go. Back to our question I see we have, how can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? We are going to post it onto the audit website, and it will be with the recording and the actual PowerPoint. We have, and you know what, for the PowerPoint, just to go back, I'll go ahead and send it out to the list of people who are WebEx as well. Right after this, I'll just send you out a PDF of it. It's a checklist that departments can use to train staff on fraud prevention. We have a few checklists that we get through, like the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. I'm sure the best way, because there's ones, like the ADFE has a website, and I guess let's try to click back to here. We have some resources. We have some resources that we list here in this PowerPoint that, you can go and check out. But I think it'll be depending on also what your department is, and kind of we can work with you on identifying one that will be that'll make for what the process is. Because, depending on if it's something that's, more cash focused versus things where people are in the systems or things like that. So if you have something, something that's kind of, it's hard to do a generalized one without knowing what you're looking at and how to kind of customize it for that. But we can definitely, to the person, we can respond to that question, and, you can send a what the area is, and we can do a quick little research, because we have a bunch of fraud materials, but we just want to make sure we're giving you the right thing. And any other questions, you can send them through the chat. We'll give it a couple minutes. But what we'll do is I will send out a PDF of this presentation to everyone who's on the meeting invite. And as I said, the recording as well as the PDF document will be posted to our audit website, which is audit.ucsf.edu. If you have any other questions that you think about that we haven't covered, or something else that you wanted to ask us that you didn't want to send through the chat, please send us an email at auditadvisor@ucsf.edu. We can answer it there for you as well. But it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so thank everyone for your time this morning, and we'll send you, when we have next fraud session, we will send it out to you as well.